Number one.
Ready?
Hello.
Hello, I'm Bill Calhoun. This is a Freethought Forum sponsored by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationality Society of Tennessee. And we're very pleased to be here tonight. And now I'm going to introduce my partner, Joe Barnhart.
Yeah, I'm Joe Barnhart, and I want you to know that this is an open for discussion program. And if you do or don't believe in God, we want to hear from you. I want you to share with us some of your ideas, and we'll give you some of our ideas. And our program is committed to good, rational, open, free inquiry and the science and free of supernatural beliefs.
Okay, today we're going to tackle one of the difficult issues for rationalists and atheists alike is depression, the period of the black time of a person's life. We call it melancholy. So we're going to try to see how we can twist together a rational approach toward depression and recognizing at the same time there's probably a spiritual aspect.
Yeah, what is rationality and depression? How do they work together? The Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee sponsor this program, and they meet 2 times a week. We have evening meetups for fun and food and conversation, and Ask is that's the Society for the Atheists is a value for community and camaraderie and outreach to other people. And our Tuesday meeting is going to meet after this program at Barley's Tap Room at Pizzeria here in Knoxville, downtown, in the Old City.
Yes, and on the following Sunday, and also most months on Sunday, will be the Skeptics Book Club. The title of the book for this meeting is Hardwiring Happiness, the New Brain Science of Contentment, Calm, and Confidence by Rick Hansen. That is Sunday, October 11th at 2 p.m. The public is invited to participate. You need not have read the book to attend, but of course it will help. Visit rationalist.org to find the rest of the calendar of books, and you can find the book at Books A Million's new location at 8513 Kingston Pike, Knoxville, Tennessee. Just one reminder, rationalist.org on the website.
Good. Thank you. And, okay.
Next week, there's going to be a special guest.
Yes.
Viewers can call in while we interview Shelley Siegel.
Shelley Siegel. She flirts with the elements of jazz, folk singing, and pop and blues, and then some kind of electronical and imparting a pure joy in her music. And also she's dealing with some heartfelt passions and some heartfelt lyrics that are moving. And she has music that really has lyrics to it. So it's not just aggression that some people think is music today. And also grassroots activities. And she'll deal with the questions of religion and atheism in some of her music.
Yes. I want to make a little pitch toward a book. This is a little bit selfish on my part.
Good deal.
I wrote a book called The Fall and Beyond. Most of the comments I'll have tonight about depression and rationality, you can find them in this book. It's available at Amazon.com and so on. It's interesting. It was quite an interesting experience for me to go through writing this book. Writing books are an interesting way of therapy, and just sort of like music is important. I find I do quite a bit of writing. But let's talk about depression. It's been around a long time, and we've had a lot of ifs, ands, and buts about what it is. Back in the days of the Greeks, early on, they talked about body humors, and one of the body humor was melancholy. And in a book by Carol Adrian called Purpose of Your Life, I have a little section here. She referred to this period in a person's life as the void. We are at some point in time going to go into that void. Almost everybody will experience a period or maybe 2 or 3 of these periods in their lifetime, and it's sometimes difficult to get out of that void. The void may be stimulated by an unexpected and unwelcome life change, such as divorce or job loss or so on.
What about death?
It may also come upon you before these precipitating events. The message it seems to have is something to do with your feeling not connected with life. You just don't seem to know where you are. And notice that her book is titled The Purpose of Your Life. She tries to show you in the book repeated ways you can find that purpose of your life. She further says mystics have referred to this deep alienation as the dark night of the soul. If you don't happen to believe in the word soul, let's talk about spirit, psyche, or just the dark night.
The personality, yeah.
A metaphor for night, however, suggests one thing: there will be a dawning. I recall having heard people talk about visiting a psychiatrist or counselor, and the patient says, "When will it end?" And the counselor says, "It will end." When will it end? It will end. And that's sort of a circle that you have to break. Not asking, when will it end, but I'm going to help it end.
Okay, a question. How do you define the difference between sadness and depression, Bill?
They're both parts of the same aspect. And one of the issues that I'm not happy with in modern psychiatry and psychology and social work is this thing called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, where they think they can label anything and that explains it. Like obsessive compulsive disorder means that you want things ordered nice and neatly in your drawers in your home and so on. Well, sadness is melancholy. Melancholy is sadness. Depression can be either relatively mild, and the way the books define it is if it continues more than, say, 2 weeks, and if you're having suicidal thoughts, you better seek help, because that is one of the dangers of severe depression, is people do in their lives. People who are what you call bipolar depressives, 1 out of 8 will take suicide as an option.
Okay, now I want to ask some hard questions. When some person commits suicide, how do you know whether it's depression or aggression? Sometimes,
as a matter of fact, the early Freudian psychologists would argue that depression is anger turned inward. Therefore, it would be the same thing, aggression toward the self.
Toward yourself.
However, I think of it rather than that being something that you've really given up. You just feel like we had this case of this young man in Oregon who went into a school and shot some people. Now they're getting information about some of the things. He said, I'm alone, I don't have any girlfriends, I don't have a job, I don't have a future. All I know to do is to strike out. And he ended up taking his own life. In a sense, that whole action was an aggressive act against himself, even though he killed other people in doing it. It really was, because he did, in fact, shoot the final bullet into his body that killed him before the police arrived.
How old was he, remember? How old was he?
26.
So he just got started.
Well, there's a lot of more complicated things. He has had a serious, difficult time in school. In fact, he joined the Army and only lasted for 1 month, and they discharged him. And it's too bad someone didn't flag that record and get it to somebody, because this indicates that he was maladjusted to trying to serve in a situation which is pretty structured, as we all know who've been in the military. But he was unable to deal with
all of that.
And the fact that he's been living with his mother at age 26 suggests again that she was protecting him, which is not healthy in the long run. Birds, when they leave their nests, assume their babies will fly. It's hard for mothers and fathers to sometimes realize they have to teach their young sons and daughters to be able to fly as well, which means be independent.
What's
Go
that
out
called?
and be on your own. That's part of what parenting is supposed to be about. Sometimes we don't know how to cut that
cord.
tie. Especially if you see a handicap in the person, and you can't help but feel love. And you hope that protecting them is a way of giving love, but in fact, it's really not that way, because once you're protecting somebody, they become dependent on you for that protection, and they're going to be scared because someday you'll go away, and then who is going to be there to provide that protection?
Okay, now, you've talked with people who have been really depressed, not just sad, and I have too. And I remember when I did that once a long time ago, they said, just don't tell me what to do. I was trying to give them, advice, and that's not what they needed at that time. In fact, that was bad advice. What they needed is to be understood that they really were hurting.
Yes.
That they weren't just having a hard time, that it really was different from what most people go through. And he says, I feel like my life is going nowhere. Now, most of us don't really feel that. We might think of that for a day or two or a week.
Well, you're right. I remember one time sort of being young and foolish, like you sort of said. I had a doctoral student that I'd gotten to know pretty well, a very bright woman. And she had been in a graduate class with me, and I really was impressed. And she kind of just sort of disappeared. And then she came back one day, and she mentioned she had been depressed, and I made some offhand comment like, well, we all get blacks now and again. And she said, you don't know what you're talking about. She said, you think that staying home with the drapes closed and the phone unplugged and sitting there in a chair in a dark room is just being unhappy a little bit? She said, finally, I got to somebody who said, you need to get a good physical examination. Mm-hmm. Now, this woman was married, and she had several children. She was probably 35 when I first got to know her. She had a good physical examination, and hormones, the female hormones were all out of kilter, and they finally recommended a hysterectomy with replacement therapy with the hormones, and pop, she was out of her depression. That's the kind of depression that's physical, based upon real things, and there are ways of getting out of it. But you could not have talked her out of this, and she could not have even got out of it on her own, other than taking her own life. But yes, you have to recognize that there are basically two kinds of depression. One is based upon events in your life, like divorce. And it's natural for a person to be depressed when they're going through, for example, having a wife die, or going through divorce, and even when kids leave home. I remember the first time my eldest son went away to college. I felt a little melancholy, like I'm going to miss him, because he and I were close. Yeah. And he was gone. It's a loss. That will take care of itself in time. But the other one is basically biochemical, biological. It often appears in families. You'll find out there's a period, in the generations often, usually down the male side, you'll find out that your granddaddy was a depressive personality too. And that kind of depression has to be treated with medical help. And often medication can help. And the medications that have come on board in the last 30 or 40 years for bipolar depression, for example, lithium is very effective in keeping the bipolar disorder dampened down and therefore preventing an onset of severe depression. And other medicines like Prozac and Zoloft can be very helpful. However, you usually need some kind of supportive therapy. And this is where I think the spiritual aspect comes in. Can you get supportive therapy from your priest or minister? Surely. Matter of fact, that's one of the best places to go to talk to somebody, because they will listen. Not every physician has the time. If you've been to a physician in the last 10 years under what we call managed care, somebody is out there with a stopwatch timing them how long they take with you. And if they go over 15 minutes, they start to blow the whistle, because it's all about dollars in and time spent and balance one against the other.
Okay, now I got a question. Since this is the Rationalists of East Tennessee and the Atheist Society of Knoxville, you use the word spiritual. And that's not going to sit well with some of our audience. And I'm a bit Augustinian. I think the meaning of a word is the way people use it. I don't get a hang up on a definition. I want to know how you use the word.
Okay. Well, let me give you a couple of examples. One case, there was a, well, let's go back first. Pavlov is a well-known Russian physiologist, and he won the Nobel Prize for his work. And if you've had a course in psychology, I know you've heard about the ding-ding bell and all that stuff, conditioned reflexes and the like. But he was a very, very smart man.
Yeah.
Yet his wife got depressed. Now, he was a physician. That is, he had an MD degree, but he did research. He didn't see clients. He did not try to treat his wife. He referred her to a colleague who was in the business of seeing patients. And as he was talking to Pavlov's wife, he said something like, do you dance? And she said, what? You try to dance some.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Like a glass of wine? Oh. You know, a glass of wine just before bed. Something can be very, very good for you. Do you like to sing? Oh, no one wants to hear me sing. You sing for yourself. Do you like to go for a walk? Oh, I've got children. I'm busy. You could take 15 minutes just to walk outside each day and look for the sky, look for the sun, look for the birds and the squirrels, and listen to the wind and feel these things, and so on. And this is exactly what you do in what we call modern cognitive behavior therapy, which I will talk a bit about later. But I want to give you two or three other examples. One young boy, high school or adolescent children, have a difficult time because they don't have the language to describe some of their feelings.
Good.
They really don't know how to go and tell, look, Mommy, I'm depressed. Oh, no, you weren't. Go and do your homework. And even the guidance counselors often don't really know how to answer questions like that. But this young boy, like this person we were described earlier, he felt like no one seemed to be friendly with him, and he didn't seem to have anything going for him. And he decided to do what you ought to watch out for, our mothers and fathers. He cleaned out his locker at school. That's a good sign. He's got a plan. He was walking down the hall and went outside, and just as he got outside of the school, another student came by and hit him, and his books fell on the ground. Oh, just one more blow about this school. Well, another kid came along, stopped, and said, let me help you. And they got together and picked up the books, and they began to talk. And finally, the book picker-up helper guy said, let's go to my house, and we'll play some CDs and have a Coca-Cola. And they got and talked for about 2 hours. And the first boy, the one who had the books and dropped them or had them knocked out of his hand, turned to this other boy and said, you saved my life.
So one act?
One act. One act of love and caring was enough. And that, to me, is a spiritual intervention.
Okay, now that's how you're using the word.
That's how I mean the word.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
Another example is a woman
Go ahead.
was going to kill herself, and for the first time in her life, she noticed breeze, wind on her arm. Yeah, how many of you have experienced that yourself, or how many of you have not even recognized it's there? And she all of a sudden realized, there are some things in life I haven't yet enjoyed.
So it's nothing.
And she decided not to kill herself and to live on. That, again, that's an awakening. This is what we talk about, the idea of awe, being awed by. When I go out and see the moon at night, if it doesn't awe you, I think there's something missing.
My wife and I, every afternoon, try to go out whenever the sun and the clouds are in good shape to watch the colors. Now, let me try this on you, see what you think. I had a course in philosophy called Ethics, and a student came to me and said, I took this course because I had to in ethics, not they wanted, but she said to me, in this course you talked about pleasure and the importance of pleasure as a basis of ethics. And she said, this course has helped me more in my depression than anything else. Yeah. And I think what it was, Bill, is she had to accept the fact that it not only was okay to have sources of pleasure, but to find new sources of pleasure and enjoyment. But somehow she had made a contrast between hard work and enjoyment. And I talked to a man recently, and he said that what he has discovered is his work now is at the level of enjoyment.
Yes.
He said, I had to work hard to get that level. But what I want to emphasize is it's important for people to learn to develop sources of just plain pleasure.
There's nothing wrong with enjoying life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that we're fed very conflicting messages because on one hand, we know we're being fed a lot of propaganda by the advertising agencies about buying this and buying that and buying this and buying that and on and on. And we know that in some ways that probably isn't very good or healthy. But on the other hand, there's nothing wrong with buying a CD that you like to listen to. Nothing wrong at all.
Ethics and pleasure go together because if your foundation of ethics is pleasure, then you learn the hard way that some pleasures turn out to be sources of pain more than pleasure. And so I think this is how ethics actually began, is discovery that some of our pleasures lead to agony and destruction, or not quite so bad, but nevertheless we have to develop new sources of pleasure. And the same, in some ways, depression is, in some respects, not discovering new avenues of pleasure, and that's within a marriage sometimes.
Yes.
If you think you're going to be married the same as you were when you were 20, alone, now some of the things, but you have to discover new things in new ways. And some of the things of the new ways means that you can't do some of the previous things.
That's what the physician was trying to tell Pavlov's wife, is that these pleasures are available, and go ahead and enjoy them.
Yeah.
It's not wrong. Now, you're right about the fact that, for example, this terrible thing with methamphetamine, because people can create methamphetamine with pretty simple chemicals, it's available, and it can be a substitute for finding pleasure in a more practical way. And the problem with methamphetamine, heroin, and any of those elevating drugs is that at a certain point it's going to be where the drug starts controlling you. And that's when you're in serious trouble, and that's when you have to go and get help because you can't continue and continue. One of the persons I talk about in this book is Christopher Kennedy Lawford. He wrote a book about his personal fight with drugs, and it's an autobiography that is honest and open, and it's 20 years of fighting drugs, and he finally woke up one day and realized that he had to do three things. One is he had to stop taking the drugs. Two, he had to stop pretending he was a Kennedy. And three, recognize that he needed to be somebody on his own. And he finally says in the last part of his book, I finally became somebody on my own. Yes, I think this is true.
Well, I talked to a kid recently who had been humiliated in class. And I said, well, I remember as a student, and my teacher turned me on upside down, and I wasn't the most enjoyable student to her, and she got fed up with me. But I didn't find that embarrassing. And I realized, however, that some people did. I learned early that would have been embarrassing to some. And I had to learn sympathy. I just realized, okay, she's trying to correct me, and she had enough sense to protect herself. Now, I was by then in junior high, or what we call middle school today. But this kid I talked to recently was very sad and angry that she had been humiliated in class by a teacher. And I said, well, try this. Whenever you see the teacher, just say something nice to her, because it might be that your teacher is a human being. And what was interesting is that kid began to see, well, maybe she gets sad and humiliated too.
Yeah, well,
you know?
that's there's a term that's called empathy, which is very important in interpersonal relationships.
That's what this kid saw.
And that's the ability to see the other person's point of view, realizing that not only yours is important, but listen to what the other person is saying. I think we got about 20 minutes left in our program, and let's go ahead and take a little break.
Okay, who's on that next? You or me?
Now, in case you're just tuning in or turning on the TV, this is a Freethought Forum. And this is sponsored by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. The Freethought Forum is funded jointly by these two organizations and by individual contributions. By the way, this is a call-in show. If you haven't yet called in, please feel free. We're here, people waiting to take your messages, and we'll respond to any questions you might have.
So what is this, Channel 12, and then ctvknox.org. So, yeah, call in. We'll be glad to hear from you.
Okay.
And so let's get back to our program, huh? Now, I want to ask you another. By the way, I should mention to our audience, Bill is formerly of the psychology department at the University of Tennessee, was actually chairman. That would make me depressed to be a chairman. I can tell you that. I was chairman once, and I said, that's enough.
That's when I had my fall.
That was enough for me. I like teaching, and I think the reason I enjoyed teaching and never got depressed about teaching is I simply would not become a dean, even though I was asked, and would not become a chairman, except at one night. And after 2 years, I left the whole school and got a better job teaching. And then I said, from now on, no more. And a friend of mine was good at this, and he became a dean and a college president, and was very good at it. Yeah. But I would not have been a good president, and I like to think I was good at teaching, and that gave me an incredible amount of joy, and hence I don't remember ever being depressed.
Well,
but I have a friend now who is apparently got a fatal disease, and I don't know how I would feel. But this is very depressing. And he said, why would I feel so depressed? And I said, well, for one thing, you are in a depressing situation.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
And try to find ways to enjoy your life, and we'll work together on this.
Yeah. I think that one thing I did make certain I did was to end my time as head of the department. And I had 15 more years left to be a full professor with tenure and teaching, and that's my calling. That's what I think that's where I get my energy. I like to be with the students, especially the undergrad students. They're responsive, they listen, and sometimes I'll be in a classroom with like 30 of the students. I say, there's only one of me, but there are 30 of you. Now, you 30, I know, have more information to give me than I have to give you.
You have a give and take that way.
Yeah. Oh, it's marvelous.
One of my big regrets is the dean whom I knew and teased a lot, but I never really got to thank him. I think I mentioned this on the program. And I realized what a rough job he had putting up with people like me for many years. And I wish I had enough sense then to go to him and tell him how much I appreciated what he had done. For a little act of kindness, I think would have been.
All of us will have some of
him.
those memories where I wish I had told so-and-so back then. I had an aunt who taught school in the little town where I went to high school for many, many years, and she passed away about 8 years ago. She was over 100. And I went to the...
Oh, we've got to call her. Don't lose your aunt, though.
All right.
Okay, we got a caller. Go ahead. Caller.
Yes, this is Charles from Central Illinois.
Okay, St. Charles, go ahead.
Okay, Bill, I was wondering, although my information on what causes depressions is limited, but I understand that sometimes it's there's a slight mental chemical imbalance is in the brain itself. The neurochemical balance is often the cause, but it can be exaggerated by unrealistic expectations that have been the person's been brought up with.
It's a good point.
Yes, I think that's correct. No question that the biochemistry of depression has been examined in great detail, and the drugs that have been developed are aimed at changing this balance of, But you are also correct that the individual can, by having their attitude overreact to the depression. And in some cases, I guess they can just get sort of bland and underreact. But you're right. It's a combination of both of those. And in the case where it is a brain chemical disorder, medicine is the treatment of choice, along with supportive therapy.
Charles, you had a really interesting point. Sometimes we have unrealistic expectations. In that sense, it's kind of an unrealistic high. And then when reality hits between the eyes, we have a come down. And if I'm understanding what you're saying is we need to learn to have more realistic expectations. I remember...
That would be correct. But one of the worst problems I've noted, especially in a number of the more evangelical Pentecostal type religions, is they get that big emotional high at the service, and then things go on from there. Hold on 1 second. Do you know how to approach a dog you don't know?
I give up.
She's my dog. Somebody was trying to pet my dog.
Okay. If you don't improve your humor, I'm going to get in depression.
Yeah. Okay. No, literally, my dog is sitting next to me, and a young girl wanted to come up and pet her.
Okay. Okay. We want this program not to go to the dogs, however.
Yeah. Now, one of my points is that big emotional high at these services, and they walk out into the real world, and they discover the real world is nothing like what the emotional high has brought them to expect.
Okay, and that happens whether you're a theist or an atheist.
Yes.
People do this. I remember as a teenager, about 14, I hit the word moderation. And for some reason, that was like a revelation. It wasn't a divine revelation, but it really made, because I grew up in an environment of great diversity and intensity of emotion and hard work and everything. But I remember how important the concept of moderation was for this 14-year-old boy. And I think what it really meant is try to keep things in balance. Don't have... Go ahead.
Keep a good perspective on what's going on.
And that's that's hard for all of us.
Yeah, especially when you're 14 and puberty is just hit, and all those wild chemicals are running through your blood system and into your brain.
Oh boy, and I remember going through a process of thinking about being in love and saying, boy, I got to be careful, because I've been looking around seeing other people in love, and it seemed to me to be dangerous. Now, I was a 14-year-old boy, you understand. But
my other project is that a lot of these services also spend a lot of time browbeating people about what worth of stem they are, because they look at a woman and they think, the hormones flow, and they guilt trip them. And could that also exacerbate the depression sequence?
Now, spell that out. I missed it.
Okay. When they're at these services, and they've been raised since young childhood.
Oh, I got you. Yeah. Okay.
And they've been taught that it's wicked and evil and wrong to have these kind of feelings and thoughts and imaginations at night when they're sleeping and so forth. There must be something wrong with you for you to have these things.
I've got in this novel I'm working on, a client is saying, if there's a God, why does he make us have such strong sexual passions so early in life?
Yeah.
And in the story, the minister doesn't have a very good answer for that one. I think probably the reason for that, or that is the function, not the reason, is that we didn't live that long, a long time ago, and had to get started early if the species was going to survive.
But my point is that the guilt tripping, if you have problems with your minor problems with your neurochemistry, that could make things worse.
Yes. So when you meet people who...
What?
Is that your radio?
No, that's not bloody train. I'll move.
Okay, good. Because we got enough noise here with ourselves.
Yeah.
But thank you, Charles. Appreciate the help.
Okay.
All right.
And,
Bye, Charles.
Stay in touch with us, Charles.
I will.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Let me take a few moments to talk about cognitive behavior
Yeah,
therapy.
good deal.
Aaron Beck is a psychiatrist
Aaron Beck,
who's
yes.
published quite widely, and he started out working on depression, and he developed a system called cognitive behavior therapy, and is now widely adopted by almost all practitioners as the most effective treatment for typical depression. There are three aspects to what I call human nature. To me, psychology has to be the study of human nature. You can hear about it's a science of behavior or it's a science of the mind, but still, we're basically, in a global sense, it's about human nature. And I think of human nature as having three major domains or areas.
Okay.
Cognitive, or the thinking process, which includes language and memory. Action, behaving, which means the things that we do with our hands and our feet and with our mouth when we talk and so on. And then feelings, emotions. Well, we know a lot about behavior, and we know a lot about modifying behavior, controlling behavior. We can do great things in teaching animals to do certain things and what have you. We also have an awful lot of effort going into all kinds of studies of thinking and cognition and language and the like. Emotion is the most difficult one. So Aaron Beck kind of said, now look, let's think about it this way. As William James once said long ago, I discovered a great truth, and that is that I can change my attitude by just changing it. And this is what Beck is saying is, okay, we're going to get you to stop talking about sad things and start talking about good things. It's like finding pleasure. And that's why go outside and watch nature. I'm really disappointed when I see someone on the walking trail with their earbuds in. They can't enjoy the birds and the mockingbirds that sing so beautifully all year long. And my golly, you just shut it out. Okay. But anyway, when you wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and say, you know, I'm going to have a good day. And when you go to the bank, don't go to the ATM, go inside and say to that lady or man there, hi, how are you? You'll find out it changes their day. You're on an elevator.
Yes.
Don't just look down, look at somebody and say, hi, how are you? They'll be stunned that you actually recognize them, because most of us go around a lot of our day not ever saying hello to people around us. And then the other one is action. Let's work on developing an action plan. What are some of the problems that you see in your life? And let's see if you can work up a plan to approach these problems. You may talk about something like, my wife is all the time harping at me. Well, think what you do. You walk in the door, and the first thing you do is you go into your den, slam the door, and turn on the computer and start playing computer games. Yeah. Where did you go? Into your cave. Well, this is where they talk about men and Mars and women and so on and so forth. There's no question that men and women have different styles. And also, don't hide yourself in your newspaper. Another thing that I find very disappointing is when I go into a restaurant and see two people, probably a couple, at the tables, and they're both doing tweeters or sending things.
Yeah.
They're on their little computer. They're not even talking to each other.
Okay, I had a friend who was a chairman of a department, and he said, "Well, my marriage didn't last long," and that was a passing comment. I said, "Why?"
Yeah.
He said that. I wanted a discussion. He didn't particularly appreciate my question.
No, he wouldn't.
He said, "Well, she claimed I didn't listen." And I said, "Are you listening?" He said, "Yeah."
Yeah.
I said, "I've been with you a good while, and I'd like to meet your wife because that seemed to be a person I would agree with." He wasn't a good listener.
Yeah.
And he didn't last long as a chairman, and he shouldn't have, because he didn't know how to listen. He thought he was there to dictate, apparently.
Yeah, that's
And a chairman...
one of the things you almost always find out in family counseling is right away the counselor will ask the husband, "Do you listen?" And they'll all say, "Oh, sure." And they ask the wife, and they'll say, "Oh, never."
Yeah.
Now, how do you balance these two together? And
you usually have to work. Marianne and I take time. It takes time to listen.
time. It does.
And we go driving just a couple of miles or less, just to look at the sunset. And so you can take time. And other couples do different things, and you have to do that. You have to do that for yourself.
Yeah.
To take time. Some people don't listen to themselves, it seems to me, to understand how they feel because they're so busy being angry. One guy said, I don't get into the touchy-feely stuff," and he started crying, and he was feeling anger. And I said, "Well, you're in denial."
Yeah. One of the things I think in our society is that we use busy work to prevent us from dealing with our own feelings.
Yeah.
We're busy all the time. All the time. I promised myself when I was married and we're going to have children, I would not play golf on weekends. I know so many fathers who they're on the golf course on 7 a.m. on Saturday, and then they're in the clubhouse that night at the bar. And I remember a police officer said, "We really don't want to get people for drunken driving. If we want to catch people for drunken driving, we'd pick them up Sunday morning on their way to church because they're still hungover from the drinking the night before."
I hadn't thought about that.
Anyway.
Well, okay, the depression then, I talked to a guy recently who was really sick. And I mentioned this just earlier, and I could feel for the guy because if I were in his situation, I think I would feel the way he does. Now, my question is, in a situation, what can you do to create something? See, that's what I want to emphasize. Sometimes when depression is on the outskirts there, you have to invent some way to get around this roadblock.
Yes.
And that's why people have to be encouraged. That's what the word means, to put new courage into people, to say it's okay to invent something new for you that will make your life more interesting.
One of the guidelines for any kind of group therapy or group process is exactly what you say, but You don't say, oh, I can tell you how to do that. It's like, let's talk, and you tell me how you think you can do that. Because that person has to see if that person can find the barrier and work around the barrier.
Is this because what is a source of pleasure for you could be a source of pleasure for a source of pain for me?
Yeah.
In other words, there are many, many sources of pleasure and happiness, but not all of us have the same sources. And that's why it's important to discover new sources of pleasure. Now, would you say that most of our pleasure, well, I better not generalize, because it seems to me if a person had to live entirely alone, that would not be a very pleasurable life. So, which means me to say then, are most of our pleasures with other people?
Yes. Human beings are no question. They're a tribal group. They're a social group. Yeah, they're individuals who have gone out on their own and lived alone and seem to do okay. But most people want to live in a group, and they want to interact with that group. And there's got to be somewhere a book that's written that says, find the simple pleasures in life. I love just sitting in my car with a cup of tea or coffee and a book and be out and open the windows and listen to the birds, even listen to the cars go by, and you can tell which cars got those loud mufflers and which one's being driven by a teenage kid and so on. It's there. It's just there but you have to slow down, look around. And this is what they say. You're in an automobile and you're in a traffic jam, and oh golly, so you sit there honking the horn, pounding the steering wheel. No, turn on the radio, open the window, smile at the people around you, even get out and walk up and if when you go to your car in the morning, do you pat it and say thank you? You would really appreciate it. Probably run better too. It's about you. There was a story about a man that when he came home at night, he would drive the car up into the driveway. He'd get out and he'd walk out to a tree, and he would put his hand on the tree.
Yeah.
And someone said one day, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm hanging up my troubles. Now, tomorrow morning, I'll come out and get them back. But when I go in the house, those troubles are hanging on that tree." Can you imagine how much joy and happiness will be in that family when he doesn't come home and gripe about, all this and that and this? We all have troubles and trials and tribulations in our life. Golly.
So people have little things like that. All of us do.
All of us do.
And what is ridiculous for another man is very important to me. In other words, we are greatly different in many respects. And so what is one person's source of pleasure may not be another person's source of pleasure.
That's for sure.
And so that's why we have to develop incredible respect for. In other words, I think what I'm trying to say, Bill, and see what you think. A major source of pleasure for human beings is to find pleasure in other people's pleasures.
Oh, yeah.
And there are too many grouches in the world, it seems to me, who simply can't do this.
I found that one thing that I do, I occasionally visit people who are members of the church that I attend, might be in a hospital for an operation or whatever it is. And go to the hospital. Matter of fact, this gentleman right here was present in the Tennessee Valley Church when a man came in with a shotgun and fired pellets at people, and he's carrying some around in his back. Go to the hospital and just be there. Don't just hurry in and hurry out. Walk in slowly and sit down, demonstrating that you have come to lend yourself to this person.
A little support is
support.
It means a lot to people. Yeah.
And I've read cases where sons and daughters have a parent who is very seriously ill and pretty much in a coma. But they'll say still, I just go in and I sit. And I know that she knows I'm there, even though she can't see me or talk to me.
Yeah.
And then touch her.
Yeah.
As you go out, make that contact. If you read anything about the studies with the monkeys and the mothers and the so on, the things, monkeys, for natural reasons, the young monkey clings to the mother. And that makes sense, because if the mother's going to go scooting up a tree, the little guy better hang on. But this contact comfort, this is found with humans too. The young babies that end up in a incubator type setting because they're premature and have been taken away from their parents are affected by that, and then they've been developing programs where the mother comes in, sits for a while, actually holds the child, and even feeds the child.
We still have a phrase, "Get in touch with me," and I think that's a meaningful phrase. That's a meaningful phrase.
I think it
keeping communication. I've often teased a friend of mine who's a theist, and I said, "Now, once upon a time, God was alone. For how long?" See, alone. I said, "Your theory had to break God up into three in order to be a social being." And the monotheists, like the ancient Jews, had to have God with lots of archangels. Why? Because to conceive of a deity who's supposedly somewhat person-like, if this deity is wholly alone, how do you distinguish that forever, say for just only a few billion years, let's say, then how is that distinguished from hell? And so they saw the point that social life, social existence is part of an individual's life. In fact, I would argue, and I think you would too, there is no such thing as a person without having had a social womb, a social environment, because the social environment creates individuality. Language itself is a social thing. You can't talk to yourself very well until you first have a language.
I never tried it.
My dad used to say, "I only talk to myself when I have to have a really intelligent conversation," but he was just obviously joking. Well, we've got a few more minutes, but we need to...
I think one thing we can kind of begin to pull this stuff together is that all the kinds of things we're talking about is recognize that you can change how you think.
Good.
And you can change what you do. And changing those things will change how you feel. You walk into a post office, you see the line is 5 or 6 persons deep and there's only one person there.
Yeah.
Talk to the person right in front of you in line and see how much faster the time goes. Rather than sit there and fuss or get on your cell phone and go on about how this postal person... I don't know if you've ever had a job like working at a post office, but it's got to be difficult.
Yeah.
And when you go out to get your mail in your mailbox, and here comes the postal person up in the vehicle, stop and talk. Say hello. And it'll make their day. It makes you...
When I go out to the supermarket, I always try to say something to people, even in the parking lot. And I'm amazed at the number of people who will be very friendly.
Yes.
Just, total strangers.
Yes.
My daughter used to tease me, "Dad, you just stop. You don't know who these people are, and you start having conversation." But it seems to me, and enriching to me, and maybe to them, because they stay long enough to, and introduce me to their children sometimes. But I think that's part of what makes life just more enjoyable. And then there are times when people want to be alone and be away from contact, and so we have to find those sources and moments. And that's what I think you're getting at, is you have to know when to change and when to modify both our behavior and our thinking. And that's one way you're saying, if I'm understanding, you got to learn to change your thinking, and we have to learn to change our behavior. And then if we do that, it's very likely our emotions might change too, along with that.
They definitely will change.
If we change those two, emotions will probably follow somewhat.
Because you get at the emotions through the other changes, okay?
Okay, our time is running out, I think, so we better start here.
Okay. It's time to start wrapping things up. Get out your pen and paper. This has been a Freethought Forum, which is a program sponsored by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationality Society of East Tennessee.
And
I am, as he said, I'm Bill Calhoun. I want to remind you of this little book, The Fall and Beyond. A lot of what I've talked about, I've repeated in here, and I think it's a valuable kind of resource. There is help for depression, but it's never wrong to ask somebody for help. That's another thing. Don't be afraid to say, I need help.
And hope next time you're with us, maybe you'll have time to give us some feedback. And 865-272-9060, and then you've got a number on the screen that can help us to hear from you. And so if you have other ideas on the next time we're on the program, call in with us and talk with us. So I guess it's about time for us. Have we got more minutes? How much more time we got?
2 minutes and 30.
Oh, good. Well, I want to raise another question.
By the way, you're listening to this show on Tuesday at 5 o'clock, and you can pick it up. You also can get a rebroadcast of it if you get onto one of the web pages. You'll have to call the station here to get the proper hookup, but I have been able to see myself on it, okay? And
do this one too while we're at it.
Okay.
Fastest group is religious group in America is the no religion group. I wonder what that means.
I think that part of it is what our caller said, is that if you're being given a message from the pulpit and you walk away feeling uplifted, and then all of a sudden you realize that, man, it just doesn't work with reality. That's, in the sense of anything, I think that people who tend to want to be agnostics or atheists or talk about being rationalists want to get common sense as available to help them deal with the issues in the world. You don't have to even believe in heaven or hell. Don't have to.
In fact, that's a very
You may choose to. You don't have to. And I happen to choose not to. They say about a Unitarian in a hospice, and it's probably going to be dying in a few days, and the nurse asked him, where are you going to go? And he says, I don't know, but I'm going to be all dressed up and have no place to go.
may even die and go to damnation.
If it makes you feel better about having heaven, that's good. But the Universalist said years ago is, God would never be so evil as to make people go to hell.
Was it Thomas Aquinas said he was going to take pleasure in knowing that there were those people in hell? And I remember asking a friend of mine, said, how do you distinguish that from a sociopath? Anybody that takes pleasure in the eternal misery of other people. That's not my source of religion. If that's religion, I don't think that's all there is to religion, but if that is, keep me away from it, because it's evil.
We're counting down to about 10 seconds, so I would like to say goodbye and thank you for your attention this evening.
And be with us the next time and help us out next time.
And go